kind of get to the end of 5.2, I would like for the people who were here yesterday to summarize for me what they have learned so far. Let's start with the easy stuff. Let's start with module 5.1. What did you learn yesterday about some of the long-run consequences and or short-run consequences of economic policies, monetary and fiscal policies? What do we got? I'd like for you to start us off. I don't mean to pick on you. I'm just, you were in my eyesight.
Well, we talked about how the government adjusts fiscal policy in response to the Fed, not the Fed adjusts their response to the government.
Lily?
We also talked about how monetary policy usually, especially with the contractionary phases, how monetary policy is usually more better received by the public than fiscal policy.
Yeah.
In comparison to.
Yeah. What are you looking for, hon?
Tissues.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if I have any extra tissues. You can go to the restroom and get some bath tissue. It's all right. Does anyone remember why it is that the public generally is less angry about monetary policies that are contractionary in nature? Parker?
Because if they're expansionary, they're going to be increasing or lowering interest rates.
No, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy. Why does the public not like contractionary fiscal policies?
It increases taxes.
Yeah, so nobody likes to pay more in taxes, and nobody likes an entitlement that they've been given to be taken away, right? Once you have received something, think about it like this. If your parents changed your curfew, let's say now that you're a senior or when you're going into your senior year, they're saying like, okay, your curfew has gone from midnight to 1 o'clock. And then you're like 2 months into your senior year and they're like, JK, actually you need to be home at 12:30 on Friday and Saturday night. What would your response be? Like, what the heck? I had this privilege. I didn't misuse it. I didn't abuse it. Now you're taking it away. Like people don't like that. Okay. Generally speaking, we can see much more responsive monetary policy than we can with fiscal policy. The time lags are shorter, and the Fed can be a lot more responsive. Okay? So generally speaking, more often than not, fiscal policy is just the automatic stabilizers. There usually needs to be some type of catastrophic or very dramatic event that takes place that gets our Congress to change the law, tax law or entitlement transfer payment laws and things like that. Something like the Great Recession or the pandemic or something like that, okay? Or when a politician thinks they have a very strong mandate to do something the way that Trump felt, rightly or wrongly, to help Congress change tax law in 2017, okay? If the next administration, or if we end up with a differently structured Congress after the November elections, if they decide that they want to change the tax law back to what it used to be, they are really going to have to justify that. They are going to have to talk it up. They're going to have to get on the bully pulpit and really sell it to the American public to convince us that our taxes should be higher, and to convince firms and CEOs and owners of companies that their corporate taxes should be higher. Okay, it's going to be hard to do that. Okay. All right, what else do you guys remember from 5.1? Okay. It was a pretty easy module. If you weren't here yesterday, and I think you two were the only ones who weren't, like, if you read it, it's straightforward. Like, we don't need to belabor it or review too much more. But let's get to the beginnings of 5.2, okay? And that's what we're going to do today. I did not finish 5.2 yesterday, and one of the things that I really wanted to make sure that we were really solid on is the short versus long run Phillips curves, because you will absolutely be asked about both on the macro exam, okay? They always ask, okay? What causes a movement along the short run Phillips curve? Parker.
Shift in aggregate demand.
A shift in aggregate demand, okay? So a shift in aggregate demand that leads us to a different price level, and also then in the short run, a different unemployment percentage is gonna be a movement along, okay? Because there's a trade-off in the short run between the price level and our unemployment rate, and it's a negative relationship, okay? What causes a shift in the short run Phillips curve?
Supply shock.
A supply shock, okay? Specifically, what causes the short run Phillips curve to shift up and to the right? Yuri? A negative supply shock. And so if we are seeing a contraction in the short run Phillips curve, that is a positive supply shock, okay? I'm not gonna go over too much like why that's true, except for I hope it makes sense to you that when short run aggregate supply shifts, right, when it expands, we get both an increase in output or income and a decrease in unemployment. And when there's a negative supply shock, we get stagflation, we get a reduction in real GDP output or income, and an increase in the unemployment rate, okay? All right. Who wants to explain to the folks who weren't here yesterday why we have a long run Phillips curve that is shaped the way that it is? First of all, how is the long run Phillips curve shaped, Lily?
It's a vertical line.
It is a vertical line up, okay? Where is that vertical line up? Where does it originate and why is it there? Lily?
It marks the natural rate of unemployment.
Yes. It will be a vertical line up from wherever the natural rate of unemployment is, okay? That means the natural rate of unemployment, again, to remind you guys, is only structural and frictional. It's the absence of any cyclical unemployment, okay? All right. Why is that, by the way? Why do we have a vertical long run Phillips curve at our natural rate of unemployment percentage?
1939 with Europe. When did it start in Asia?
Why is that true in the long run?
Before that? Well,
Let's take some guesses.
37.
Safa?
1937 is when the Japanese invaded China. They already had Manchuria.
Okay. Parker?
I was gonna say because it takes a long time for the short run to keep adjusting, and eventually there's gonna be a point and it's gonna adjust back to the natural rate of unemployment.
Right, because in the long run, right, we end up with different price levels and that kind of thing because of the change in wages, in nominal wages, etc. But it also, guys, importantly, is the result of expectations about inflation. Tell me a little bit about that, because yesterday we spent a long time talking about how our expectations about future inflation are a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why is that true? I'm not going to let Lily answer this question because she answered it yesterday. Why is inflation a self-fulfilling prophecy? Yeah.
Because if the people think that the next year inflation is going to go up really high, they're going to try to buy everything now, which is going to shift the aggregate demand curve to the right, which is in general is going to cause inflation
Yeah.
already.
Yeah. So if people have an anticipation of prices going up, they're going to modify their behavior right now. And if everyone's doing that, it's going to push aggregate demand to the right, which will push prices up. What's the other reason? That it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When people expect inflation to be higher next year, what do they do when they sit down for their performance reviews?
Like the workers ask for more money.
Yeah, the workers ask for more money. That makes costs higher for firms, and they then have to raise their prices in the long run to reflect those higher costs. Okay? Okay, very, very good. All right. So the difference between a lot of different short-run Phillips curves, okay, has to do primarily with our expectations about future inflation and we end up at the non-accelerating rate of inflation and unemployment, which is this then vertical curve, which looks like this, okay? So the important takeaway from this is that in the long run, there's no trade-off between inflation and unemployment. That is a relationship or a trade-off that only exists in the short run. Okay, and I hope this makes sense to you guys. Even without the Phillips curve, if you think about the work we've done in macroeconomic equilibrium, we can see it happening when we get shifts in the short run. Okay, let's say we got this, we go to AD sub 2, right? This is a movement along in the short run, but then this in the long run eventually leads to higher nominal wages, which causes short run aggregate supply to shift to the left, and then we end up here, okay? And you know, like this process is happening like just kind of constantly. Aggregate demand is shifting, that leads to changes in short run aggregate supply, and we end up back there, okay? And this also helps to explain why the short run the short run Phillips curve shifts because of supply shocks in the absence of any aggregate demand shifts. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, question.
So how do we know that the long run Phillips curve is through the E's instead of the ABC point? Like, how do we know which?
Okay, so the reason is that this is the natural rate of unemployment, right? So if there is, let's say, a supply shock or a shift in the expectation about inflation, right, that stuff is it's gonna kind of go to the left here first, but then after all those shifts are made, we end up with another short run Phillips curve back at the natural rate of unemployment, right? Because this is happening with aggregate demand shifts, then this is happening with changes in short run aggregate supply. Does that make sense? Okay, but we're always back to that potential outputs sort of area where you have the natural rate of unemployment is where we're in our stable place, okay? All right. So the long run equilibrium is okay. So another important thing, guys, especially on the macro exam, if you get a question that has to do with, like they show you a long run Phillips curve and they show you a short run Phillips curve, you should be able to determine based on that, if they say, here's point A, what does that represent? That is a recessionary gap, okay? Point B would be an inflationary gap, okay? Also, besides supply shocks, we've got shifts in short run Phillips curves that are the result of our expectations about future inflation, Okay, right now, and over the last couple years, our short-run Phillips curves have been shifting up dramatically because the rate of inflation's been going up, and our unemployment rate's been actually coming down. Okay. So if we're at point B, that inflationary expectation increasing will cause the short-run Phillips curve to shift upwards, and then we're at a new level of, and then we get back to E sub B. So we're at the same inflation rate, but we'll eventually all that will shake out with prices and wages changing, and then we're back at our natural rate of unemployment. Okay. Over time, the long-run Phillips curve can also shift. Here are the things that will shift the long-run Phillips curve. Changes in the characteristics of our labor force. For example, in the late 70s and early 80s and into the 90s, when millions and millions more women joined the labor force. Okay? We're having a structural shift in our labor force right now as more and more baby boomers retire. Okay? Changes in labor market institutions, like how many people belong to labor unions or other trade guilds. And then also changes in government policies as it relates to transfer payments for people who are unemployed. Okay? So the thing that can shift the long-run Phillips curve are things that will also change our natural rate of unemployment. Are there things that are going on that are increasing or decreasing frictional and structural unemployment? Okay, so right now, I predict that we will have a long-run Phillips curve shift as a result of artificial intelligence. Okay, that is going to change the characteristics of our labor force. I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm not going to make any predictions about that, but I think that AI is going to definitely change the characteristics of the American labor force. For better or worse, I don't know. That's not the point, but it is going to change things. Changes in labor market institutions, like I said, trade organizations, unions, etc. That's another thing. I don't know. Changes in government policies. How long can you take unemployment insurance, for example? How long before, these all have to do more with taxes to some degree. Like if you get paid more, your taxes go significantly higher. That could lead to more people being frictionally unemployed. They decide I'm done working because I don't want to pay so much more in taxes. That's a very small percentage, right? But if we change transfer payments for people who are unemployed, that's going to shift things. Okay. So an increase in the natural rate of unemployment shifts the long run Phillips curve to the right, and if it's a lower number, it shifts to the left. They've got in the book 6%, but I think the natural rate of unemployment is actually lower than that now. I think it's closer to 4.5%, if I were to hazard a guess. Okay, before we move on to 5.3, I would like for you guys to attempt this FRQ, all parts of it. And you can work with your table mates.